few moments later, they arrived at the doors of the hall Gunnar had seen from the ridge, the one he'd guessed belonged to a rich lord. He was dragged through the porch past racks of spears and into the dark interior. He caught a glimpse of long tables and benches and faces, and he was flung down on the reed-covered floor. A fire burned in the hearth, big logs crackling and spitting. Beyond it, a huge man sat on a throne of bones, a pair of giant narwhal tusks crossing above his head. He was bald and fat, the flesh of his jowls merging into his neck as if they had melted, the mountain of his body covered in a fine red tunic. He wore a thick gold chain around his neck and gold rings on all his fingers, and he stared at Gunnar, his eyes like those of a lizard, cold and unblinking. "What is this you've brought me, Gork?" the man said, his voice so deep it seemed to come from somewhere in his vast belly. "A gift. You shouldn't have, but you're such a generous, good-natured lad." The rest of the hall had fallen silent, and Gunnar sensed people in the shadows around him to watch what was going on. Half a dozen hard-faced warriors stood behind the throne, hands on their sword hilts. "A new boy for your slave pens, Orm," said Gork. "I only wish I could make you a gift of him, but alas—" "What did you say?" hissed Gunnar, glaring at Gork and trying to find his feet. "I'm freeborn. You can't sell me like some farm animal." "We can do whatever we want with you," hissed Ivar, cuffing him round the head. Niall grabbed the back of Gunnar's neck and pushed him down, grinding his face into the floor. "Now just keep quiet," he said. Gunnar struggled, but his mouth was full of dirt and reeds, and Niall's hands were strong. "My heart bleeds for you," said Orm, studying Gork with narrowed eyes. "But I'm not in the market for any more slaves just now. My pens are full." "I don't believe it," said Gork. "You're always interested in a bargain. I'm not even going to ask you for the going rate. Just give me 5 gold pieces." "Show me his face again," rumbled Orm. Gunnar gasped as Ivar grabbed his hair and pulled his head up. It felt as if his scalp were being ripped off his skull. "He looks better than the filthy scrapings of the alleys you usually bring me," said Orm, "but I'd still be mad to pay you more than 2 gold pieces." "Now it's my heart that's bleeding," said Gork. "I'll settle for 4. 3, and that's my final offer. Take it or leave it." "Dan, you're an hard man, Orm, but a fair one." Orm snorted like a walrus. "Pay him, Rorik," he said. Niall let go of Gunnar. One of the men behind Orm stepped forward and counted coins into Gork's hand. "So long, Gunnar," said Gork. "We wish you happiness in your new home, wherever that may be, of course." They strolled away, and the others in the hall drifted back to whatever they had been doing. "But aren't you purchasing the pens, Rorik?" said Orm. "You're not putting me in any slave pen," Gunnar yelled. "I'm no thrall." "Oh, but you are, boy," growled Orm. He smiled, his white teeth glinting in the firelight. "You've been bought and paid for." Gunnar started to protest again, but Rorik pulled him to his feet. The big man had hair the colour of straw, but his beard was brown, and his eyes were greeny-grey, reminding Gunnar strangely of Mother's. "Give it up, or Orm will make me beat you," said Rorik. "That's something neither you nor I will enjoy." There was a gentleness in the big man's voice, and sense in what he'd said too. So Gunnar did as he was told, and let himself be led out of the hall. He needed to think, to work out what to do. But then they entered a courtyard, and Gunnar saw something that soon had him dragging his feet. A line of enclosures made of wooden stakes lashed together, like animal pens, but for people instead. Those packed into the pens were young and old, tall and short, fair or dark-skinned, but all of them were quiet, expressions of despair or blankness on their faces. Somehow the silence made it worse. Gunnar felt his soul start to shrivel and wondered how long it would be before he looked the same. Rorik dragged him across the courtyard, past some guards standing by a brazier, its flames flapping in the cold wind. Gunnar expected to be put straight in the pens, but Rorik led him towards a smithy in the far corner. Rorik pushed Gunnar inside, then stooped to follow him through the wide entrance. The stifling heat hit Gunnar like a blow. A dark, sour-faced man was standing at a big anvil. He wore a leather apron and was banging away with a heavy hammer at a rod of white hot metal, his huge arms and shoulders shining with sweat, the forge behind him glowing red like the mouth of a dragon. Pieces of metal of all sizes, and more tools, tongs, pokers, a shovel, leaned against the walls. "You know what to do, Ogni, you miserable wretch," growled Rorik, "and hurry up. I don't want to be near you for any longer than I have to." "A feeling's mutual, you backstabber," growled the smith. He held up the metal with a pair of tongs, and Gunnar saw it was shaped into a ring that wasn't quite yet closed. "So it's lucky for you. This one's nearly ready." There was a hatred in the exchange, but for all Gunnar cared, they could kill each other on the spot, and Orm and everybody else who worked for him. All he wanted to think about was escape. He was sure he could outrun Rorik and the guards, though he wouldn't get far with his hands tied. He strained against the binding, but sensed that he was being studied. Rorik was staring at him. "Nothing to say, boy. At this point, new slaves are usually weeping for their mothers and begging to be set free. You just seem to be thinking." "I've got plenty to think about," said Gunnar. "What will happen to me?" "The pig Ogni here will fit you with a nice shiny thrall ring to go around your neck," said Rorik. "Then Orm will put you up for sale. He buys and sells slaves. He's the richest man in town, which is why he's called the King of Kaupang, even though he doesn't have a drop of royal blood in that fat body of his. After you've been sold, you'd better just hope for a kindly master." The smith dipped the thrall ring into a bucket of water. There was a great hissing noise and clouds of white steam. He took it out again and approached Gunnar, pulling it open so he could slip it around the boy's neck. Gunnar had a feeling this was probably his last chance. "When are you going to untie my wrists?" he asked Rorik. "I can't feel my hands anymore." Rorik smiled and shrugged. "Well, we can't have that now, can we?" he said, and he unsheathed the dagger on his belt and cut through the bindings. As soon as Gunnar's hands were free, he stepped over to the wall and grabbed the shovel. He swung it round by the shaft and smashed the flat of the wide blade into the smith's face. There was a dull clang and the crunching noise of bone breaking, and Hogni staggered back, toppling over the anvil, crashing down behind it in a terrific clattering of tools and thrall rings. Gunnar drew the shovel aside and dashed out of the smithy, listening for the clamour of pursuit. But all he could hear was the sound of Rorik, roaring with laughter.